if you look at it, Joe Mixon, he left. Tyler Boyd, good security blanket for Joe Burrow. He left, went to Tennessee Titans, as I alluded earlier. They did get Zach Moss from Indy. They do have Chase Brown, who I'm high on. I love Chase Brown in that passing game, the third down back, the scat back that everybody looks for in fantasy. So I am in New England. You can see my hat. I am a Miami Dolphins fan. I'm not playing bias card here. I just think that Cincinnati Bengals just don't have enough this week to cover that number. But I do have them winning. But I can look at it as like a 27-21 type of game for the Cincinnati Bengals. So New England beats that spread. Houston at Indy. When you think of a top tier division game, this is it. I know that I wasn't very, very high on the Colts, coming into this year, and I acknowledge, their lack of talent offensively. Yes, they got Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor, as we mentioned all along. Jonathan Taylor just has not been the same. Josh Downs, pretty good wide receiver. Obviously, we know Michael Pittman and what he can do. He's going to give you 1,000 yards and close to 95 catches a year on a yearly basis, as long as Richardson can get on the ball. And that's the issue. I don't think Richardson will be able to accurately throw the football at a high clip this year. He's got to do a prove it type of year, second year. Yes, he had a pretty decent first year, but he's going up against a really tough team in Houston. I do have Houston going to the Super Bowl along with the Philadelphia Eagles. I think that Houston has a total package. It's just going to come down to chemistry with the wide receivers and CJ Stroud. Defensively, I have no problem. I think a lot of people are overlooking the fact that they have Will Anderson on one side and they have Danielle Hunter on the other. Danielle Hunter had 16 and a half sacks last year. So don't tell me that their defense can't handle it. They have, yes, young, very young cornerbacks, but it's a bend don't break type of defense, and they could honestly be a top 5 defense when it's all said and done because D'Amico Ryans is a defensive minded coach. And I think Houston, again, if there's any situation that they can just avoid, is getting Stephon Diggs into a pile of mud. Like, he's got to stop, putting up a hissy fit if he doesn't get the ball. Like, you got to stop being a diva. You got to start acting like you want to win. And that's the whole reason why you left Buffalo, is you couldn't win. You couldn't beat the Chiefs, right? Well, change the scenery here. You're in Houston. You got Nico Collins. You got Tank Dell. You got Joe Mixon. You got Dalton Schultz at the tight end position. There's no excuse for CJ Stroud not to have an amazing year, a second year. He had a great rookie year. And so I really think that D'Amico Ryans can unlock that defense. And I really think in this game, Houston can absolutely cover 3. I think that I have them at like 7. I think it could be like a 35 to this is tough. 35-21. I actually think it could be above that. I really think it could be 14. Jacksonville at Miami. This is not a bias card right now. I want to make that clear. I'm not a big Tua Tagovailoa guy. I've been very pronounced about that because I need to see more out of him from a leadership and gamesmanship standpoint. And if he can get there, I believe in him, right? I believe in his clutchness. I believe he has the ability to make Tyreek Hill the number 1 wide receiver in all of football. I do believe that Jalen Waddle can be a very, very helpful supporting cast. I think that Odell Beckham Jr. can bring it. I think he could be a really good number 3 wide receiver for Tua. And I think their defense could be overlooked as far as being a top 10 defense. Anthony Weaver's back in the mix. Coming from Baltimore, he's going to have a surge on that defensive line. Bringing back Ogba's huge. I think Ogba's going to be very, very helpful in the depth rotation when Bradley Chubb is back in the mix. They got Jalen Phillips. They have Benito Jones and Calais Campbell. Calais Campbell's like 37 years old now, so he's still playing football. But I really think what it's just going to come down to is Miami's defense and Tua's decisiveness. If you looked at it last year, you would see Tua's numbers and be like, wow, hell of a year, right? I think he had 25 touchdowns and about 6 interceptions. If you look at years prior and you look at what he did last year, and he had more than 6 touchdowns, I think it was close to 12, but he had the ability to take over games and he didn't. He lost a lot of games down the stretch. I believe they went 2-2 at home down the stretch, which in my case should be higher. You know, if you're making a playoff run, you got to make it happen. I think Jacksonville's pretty overrated defensively. A lot of people say, well, like you got to look at the spreads, 3.5. A 3.5, that's pretty severely low to me. I really think that Miami will win by 7. Um, and I really think that their defense is going to outperform Jacksonville's offense. You know, Gabe Davis is new to that mix. Brian Thomas is a rookie. Christian Kirk, yeah, he's a reliable receiver, but you can cover him. Jalen Ramsey can cover him. Javon Holland can cover him. He's a safety. So I just want to see more again out of Tua and see if he's capable of making that happen. And again, Jacksonville's defense is not good, people. Do your research. It is not good. They are, I believe, 22nd last year in stopping the run, and they were almost dead last in allowing points per game. It was around 21 points per game, or no, 24 points per game. So I look at it as a bright spot for Tua to make things happen. Bet the over, bet the fact that it's 3.5. Miami's coming to play. They're at home. They want a good chance of making a run into the AFC Championship game. So moving on, we got Carolina and New Orleans. Not much to cover here. Shout out to my brother; he's a Carolina fan, but I'm not so high on the Saints. I know people look at them, Chris Olave and Alvin Kamara, and they have Derek Carr, and they're hoping Derek Carr can turn into something. Taysom Hill, the trickery, we get it. Their defense can be a top 10 defense, but I for sure think that Carolina is going to pull out a victory. I really like Carolina's mentality going into that offseason and fortifying their offensive line. They got Robert Hunt from Miami. They got Damian Lewis. They got obviously Morton Martin on one side, Taylor Martin, and they got a really good offensive tackle. I just can't think of his name. It's like El Nkua. So I just look at Carolina's capability of running the football with Chuba Hubbard and their guy, the rookie Jonathan Owens. I think he's going to have a big time year. And if you look at the body of work that Bryce Young did last year, especially down the stretch, I do think there's rookie moments with him, absolutely, last year. But you could see him trying to do more with less. And I think with him, if he can just make things more simplistic, you have Deontay Johnson. You got okay weapons there, Adam Thielen, um, but you just got to protect the football. If you can protect the football and run it with Chuba Hubbard, I think that they have a chance of winning this game or maybe breaking that 4-point spread. And don't the over under is 41.5. It's a little high. I can really see it being like 20, oh God, 17-14 type of game. And I do have Carolina winning that game. I think 17-14 is a pretty good number because I'm not a Derek Carr believer. And I know Bobby's going to hate that, but it's true. I think Derek Carr, yes, he had a great year in 2018, can we call it? But he hasn't been irrelevant since. Like he had one MVP year. So, I mean, does he throw the ball at a high completion? Sure. But he doesn't like have a lot of yardage. He doesn't have a ton of touchdowns in his career. So I'm not a believer of Derek Carr until I really see it. So that's why I do have Carolina beating New Orleans. Minnesota at Giants. I think this could be a trap game for Minnesota. And by trap game, the reason why I say that is because I think their defense is really, really good with Brian Flores. They are going to miss Danielle Hunter. Um, I really think Sam Darnold in that offensive scheme with Kevin O'Connell, they need to show a little bit more. Um, and especially in the preseason, you kind of saw it's kind of like a lot of awful decisions. Running the ball, they're gonna have a tough time. I like Aaron Jones, but he's on the back end of his career. And I think Justin Jefferson's going to be a player in this league for a lot of years. And he guaranteed that contract with them, this past off season. So it kind of puts things in perspective for him if he wants to win or if he wants to make the most money and try to get by and hopefully help this team like just get to the playoffs. I don't have a lot to say on the Giants. I wish I did. I'm just not. I just like Daniel Jones. I don't think he's a good quarterback. And like if you look at his stats, it's like what was it, 14 touchdowns last year and like 5 interceptions. Like that just doesn't get enough. Like you gotta find a way to get your playmakers the ball. And I hope Malik Neighbors can open his eyes because I think Malik Neighbors is one of the best wide receivers in that draft class, if not the best. And plus LSU, I mean, all they do is pump out, you know, wide receivers left and right. It's like, every single time you have a guy in college and, he's more than capable of getting significant touchdown numbers and yards per catch. And they're playing with Jaden Daniels, the Heisman Trophy winner. I can see Malik Neighbors having a big year, but again, it's going to come down to Jones. I do have Neighbors as rookie of the year. Offensive rookie of the year, hands down, absolutely. But they got to show more. And the running game, not that good. I mean, they got Devin Singletary. They couldn't find a way to get like Joe Mixon. I think Joe Mixon was offered, what was it, 4 years, around $24 million. You know, or it was DeAndre Swift was out there too. I mean, they had a lot of talent out there, at least to make a run for it. And why not do something in the draft too? So I think they missed a lot, and their offensive line is just not good. So um, that being said, I do think it's a trap game for Minnesota, and they're in MetLife Stadium. I think that Giants could sneak away with a victory with all that being crapped on. But it's legitimate cause. It's a legitimate cause for concern that the offensive line for the New York Giants is not well equipped enough to balance an attack out for Daniel Jones. Moving on, Las Vegas versus the LA Chargers. So when you think of the LA Chargers in the past, you used to think of high flying offense, incapability of Brandon Staley to close out games, clock management. But I think when you look at the Vegas Raiders, they built a culture, right? And Antonio Pierce is there. They got like a lot of good talent on the defensive side. I really like Christian Wilkins, coming from Miami, big run stopper, can get after the quarterback, has that edge. Max Crosby on the other side. Obviously, Devontae Adams offensively. They got a nice little two tight end set with Brock Bowers now and Michael Mayer. So I think Aiden O'Connell, if he starts, or Gardner Minshew, I think it's Gardner Minshew at this point. I think Gardner Minshew can utilize his weapons better than Aiden O'Connell. And I think Gardner Minshew is going to have like a bigger year than when he had last year. With Indianapolis, again, he was probably in the late 20s as far as being a good quarterback goes. And that's not a number that you want to be, relative to. So I really think that the Chargers will find a way to win. Mind you, the Chargers are facing a bit of a crisis, right? You got Justin Herbert, who's coming off of a major foot injury, plantar fascia. You have Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins basically switching hardballs. Then you have really no typical wide receiver number one, at least. Keenan Allen's gone. Mike Williams is gone. So you have Lad McConkey,